All right, let's get right into it.
We're about to unpack a story that's been unfolding for 40 years, a military partnership that has completely redrawn the map of global security. We're going to follow the trail of a technological alliance that didn't just fuel a war, but also send shockwaves through the entire global economy.
And at the very heart of all this is a new geopolitical bloc that analysts have started calling the CRINK axis. Now, this isn't an alliance built on shared values or ideology. Nope. It's built on a cold, hard, transactional goal: to create a parallel system, one that's basically immune to Western pressure.
And their goal isn't just to survive. It's to create an entirely different way of doing business. They're building sanction-proof supply chains, their own financial networks. They're trying to make tools like international sanctions totally irrelevant. They're not just playing the game, they're trying to change the rules completely.
So let's explore how the relationship between North Korea and Iran became such a critical piece of this new axis. You know, it's a partnership that started out pretty simply, but man, it grew into something way more complex and way more dangerous. It all kicked off back in the 1980s. Picture this. Iran is desperate, locked in a brutal war and needs weapons. North Korea is isolated and needs cash. So, since Iran was cut off from the West, it turned to Pyongyang, who quickly became a key military supplier. This one deal set the stage for decades of cooperation.
But here's the thing. This was so much more than just a simple arms deal. It very quickly evolved into a sophisticated technology pipeline. The real currency here wasn't just the missiles themselves. It was the knowledge of how to build them.
See, North Korea didn't just sell missiles. They handed over the blueprints for Iran's entire domestic arsenal. You can see how the first-gen Hwasong missiles became the basis for Iran's Shahab 1 and 2. But the real game-changer was the Hwasong 7. That tech gave birth to Iran's Shahab 3, a missile powerful enough to strike Israel and U.S. bases all over the region.
Now here's where it gets really clever. As sanctions made it almost impossible to ship whole missiles, they adapted. They just moved the whole operation online and in person. They started sharing test data, expertise on materials, and even collaborated on warhead designs. It made the technology transfer practically unstoppable.
And this shift in tactics led to a massive technological leap, one that would change the nature of the threat completely. This is the moment, right here, where Iran's missile force becomes exponentially more lethal.
The absolutely crucial point is the switch to solid fuel missiles. Think about it. Liquid fuel missiles, like the Shahab, take hours to prep on a launch pad. They're sitting ducks for a preemptive strike. But solid fuel missiles, they are ready to go. You can hide them in hardened silos and launch them in minutes, giving defenders almost zero warming.
But to build these advanced missiles, Iran needed a critical ingredient for the solid fuel. And since the final chemical was tightly controlled, they found a very clever loophole. They started importing massive quantities of its precursor, sodium perchlorate, from a supplier who was, let's just say, willing to look the other way.
And just like that, a shadow supply chain was born. The chemical starts in China, gets loaded onto sanctioned Iranian ships, and is delivered to Iran's main port. And guess who's waiting there to help? North Korean experts, ready to help with the very complex process of turning this chemical into stable, solid rocket fuel.
The scale of this operation is just staggering. We are talking about at least 3,000 tons of this precursor chemical getting to Iran. That is enough raw material to produce the solid fuel for roughly 750 advanced ballistic missiles. An entire arsenal built completely in the shadows.
So, what happens when this kind of unchecked proliferation is allowed to continue? Well, you get a total collapse of diplomacy and, eventually, the war that the world had been dreading.
And this timeline just shows you how quickly it all fell apart. In late 2025, with Iran racing ahead with its nuclear program, European powers triggered what are called snapback UN sanctions, basically putting all the old restrictions back in place at once. A final round of talks collapsed in early 2026, and with that diplomatic window slammed shut, a massive preemptive military campaign was launched.
The mission, as you can see from the U.S. Secretary of War, was crystal clear. The goal was to completely dismantle the missile and nuclear architecture that North Korea had helped build, targeting everything from launch sites to those famous underground missile cities.
But Iran's arsenal was just too big and too well hidden, so even after some devastating initial strikes, Iran was able to launch a massive retaliatory barrage, over 400 ballistic missiles targeting Israel and U.S. bases across the Gulf. It was designed to simply overwhelm the defenses.
And this is where the grim math of modern warfare becomes so clear. A single THAAD interceptor costs over $15 million. An Iranian missile? A tiny fraction of that. The US and its allies were burning through their limited stockpiles of high-end interceptors, spending billions to shoot down relatively cheap, mass-produced weapons.
Which brings us to a really crucial question. Was this the whole point? By goading the US into a super expensive conflict that drained its most advanced defenses, had the CRINK Axis already won a major strategic victory without its other members even firing a single shot?
The fallout from this war wasn't just military, not by a long shot. It sent a shockwave through the entire global economy, proving just how powerful this new alliance really was.
Iran immediately did what everyone feared. It closed the Strait of Hormuz. I mean, this is the aorta of the world economy. This one narrow choke point is responsible for 20% of the world's daily oil and 20% of its natural gas. And just like that, the flow stopped overnight.
The world's largest shipping companies, Maersk, MSC, all the big names, they immediately suspended all transit through the region. Insurers canceled their policies, and a massive chunk of global trade just ground to a complete halt.
So, what this all really shows us is a new playbook for modern conflict. Takeaway number 1. Sanctions and diplomacy simply failed to stop the technology transfer. 2. The CRINK Axis has built a resilient, parallel economy that can shrug off Western pressure. And finally, and maybe most importantly, they've proved that a strategy of cheap, mass offense can overwhelm even the most advanced, expensive defenses.
So as this network of cooperation between North Korea, Iran, Russia, and China gets deeper and more sophisticated, the old tools of sanctions and high-tech defense just might not be enough anymore. Which leaves us with a critical and pretty unsettling question. How do you stop an adversary that has effectively rewritten the entire rulebook?